Now we're going to add the background behind Delilah before we add the finishing hairs. So we need a base coat, and for a base coat I'm putting down 704.7 light gray. I'm using the side of the stick that I've sanded smooth. The reason I'm putting down a base coat is that pastel adheres differently to itself than to the raw paper. I'm going to add lots of color on top of this, so I'm putting down a base coat that kind of matches the color of the gray paper, and it will help the color to go on more smoothly. I didn't use the base coat on the dog because I didn't really need it, because I was using the brown color as the base coat and adding different colors on top of that. But we do need a base coat for this, so I'm going to add this gray. I'm going to speed this up and you can watch me quickly add in this gray before we move on to adding some different colors. The first color I'm going to add is a blue. It is 570.5 phthalo blue. It's a nice bright blue. I've sanded it on its edge, so I'm going to add some blue to the top. Now, you don't have to follow what I've done exactly. You may want to change the colors a little bit. We're going to paint this red poppy field that's around the dog. And we're going to add the sky and background color as well. So I'm going to use blue to start that with. I'm using it on the end now. Get a little more color on the paper. Using kind of a circular motion and a crosshatch motion to get that color down. In addition to the light blue-gray, I'm also using 100.5 in a circular motion to put those clouds in. This is the 727.10 pale blue-gray. So I'm using both these colors to give the impact of clouds in the background. And it kind of gives that camera blur effect as well. So I'm trying different things to determine the color palette that I'm going to use. And I like the way that's looking. Next color I'm using is a dark green, 627.5 Cinnabar Green Deep in Rembrandt. I realize my hand is right out of camera shot, but I've gone all the way up to the edge of the page and I'm just coloring in that green. It's a very hard pastel, so I have to stop a lot and sharpen it and then come back and add some more color. Greens are like that sometime, and so are dark blues. So I'm going to put the green in. I'm using the end of it and the side of it, getting in some darker color. I have to push rather hard with this color particularly. It gets a buildup on the outside of it. So if you get a buildup, sand it down, and then you can use it again. So as you can see, I'm going all the way across the top of the page and into the blue that we've already put down. So this is kind of a base coat of green. We're going to add some other colors on top of that. But I want it to be fairly dark in that corner. So I'm adding a lot of color. It's not going to move much, even if I rub it with my fingers. So I'm going to take my blue and work back into it to kind of overlap the edges a bit. I'm going to darken things further with a 700.5 black Rembrandt that I've sanded flat on one edge. So I'm lightly, because the Rembrandt black is soft, going over that green to make it darker in that corner and across the top of the page. Now I have a really nice medium green color. It is 626.5 Cinnabar Green Light, and I'm using it to work into the dark green black mixture and with the blue, and I'm just randomly putting in color. This is a very nice green color. So you can see it mixes well on top of the darker green to form kind of a medium green color. So I'm just kind of using the end to add that color and soften it a little bit with my finger. And I'm using the 727.10 to add little round out of focus circles, looks like light in the back. I don't want to use the white because I don't want it to be too prominent. So at this point, I'm just using that light gray. And put some more dark green down, and then some black, just darkening up that corner. And now I'm using the 700.5 white to make those spots just a little bit brighter. And now I'm adding some green to the other side at the top of the painting. I realize my hand's in the way, but you'll be able to see when I get done with it that I've added this green down into the blue. Pretty much using the same colors that I used before. So we want it to look like there's sky and green trees and a nice background. So I'm using the 627.5 Cinnabar Green and the 700.5 Black, both Rembrandt colors, 626.5 Cinnabar Green Light, and just using them back and forth. You can see them in my hand. And here's my light green, my 626.5. It's just a really good color. And using a circular motion to add some light green color into that dark area. I'm also using the 72710 pale blue gray to add some gray highlights in that. They're kind of vertical. It's what was in the reference photo, so I decided to just follow the reference photo and add them. And if I don't like them, then I can go over it with the green and the blue and turn it into my own background, which is what I was trying to emphasize, that you can make it like what you want it to look like at the top, but it should have a sky look and feel to it, and green trees to contrast with the red poppies that we're going to put in later. Now I'm putting a little 72710 underneath the blue on both sides of the dog. It doesn't show up very well because the bottom part of the painting is light colored as well. Now we're going to start to add the red poppies. We want it to give the idea of being red flowers, but not being so detailed and overwhelming, because the dog is the centerpiece of our painting. This is Rembrandt 371.5 permanent red deep, and I'm using it on its end and its side, and I'm kind of just placing red color in right now. I'm getting as close as I can to the dog without getting red in the dog. Red is a hard color to work with. It seems to get into everything, so we want to be careful about that. So I'm going to put in these abstract shapes. It's also very hard to find good dark red color. This is a nice bright red, but I could not find any darker reds in the Rembrandt line, so I had to go elsewhere. Now I'm putting in the green areas within the flower field with 627.5 Cinnabar and also the 626.5. And we'll go back and we'll define these more, but right now we're just getting in the basic color layers. It's just supposed to be an approximate placement of where the flowers are going to be and the green areas of the flowers. Doesn't have to be exact. So just do your best to get those areas in, and we'll go back and refine them more after we get that in. I've darkened down that corner by adding a little 700.5 black as well. I'm going to add a little more green into the shapes. Now I'm going to go over to the left side of the dog and do the same thing. In the reference photo, there was a section of white in between the blue and the red flowers, so I left that in. I'm using the same red, 371.5, and I'm just adding the shapes using the end of the pastel to kind of get the approximate placement. I'm going to speed this portion up a little bit. I think you get the idea. I'm just randomly adding the shapes. I'm following my reference, but it doesn't have to be exact. So I'm adding some greens and adding in the rest of the reds, and then we'll start refining these flowers and make them look more realistic. Now I'm going to start refining some of these little areas where the leaves are poking through into the dark area behind the flowers. And I'm using a 298 bottle green to do that. Now to darken, I needed a darker red to darken the shapes of my flowers. So I used a Giraud 48. If you don't have that, a Unison Red 7 would work as well. You can see the darker red shapes in there. And if you don't have either of those colors, look for a dark red pastel that you do have. Now I put in the little center of the flowers with the 207 chrome yellow. And so I'm being mindful of the shape of the flowers. They're kind of round. And then I'm using my 298 bottle green to go in and add some different shapes. Now this takes some time. Take your time to do it. I don't want these flowers to be so precise because they're in the background. They're supposed to be out of focus, but we do want people to know that they're looking at flowers. So I'm carefully outlining some of the shapes with my new pastel. And then I'm going back using both the 371.5 permanent red and the darker reds that I've selected to refine these flower shapes. So take your time and help these to come to life with your pastels. Using the 207 chrome yellow to add the little yellow areas where the flower centers are. And just using black here to deepen things even further in between the flowers, the underneath areas that are in the shadows. Being ever mindful that the flowers have round edges. So take your time, enjoy it, put on some music, and paint. I'm going to speed this up a little bit for you. I also want you to know I'm doing the left side before I do the right side, so I don't get my hand into the right side while I'm working. If I do the right side first, then there's a great chance I could smear or disturb that while working on the left side. So I'm going to do the left side and then work the right side because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you would want to do it the opposite way. I'm using my 626.5 Cinnabar green to add some lighter green into these areas. And I'm just using it on the round end to just add some more green into that area. If you had smaller new pastels, you could use those as well. And now I'm using the bottom of the 207 yellow to just kind of give a blurry effect to those centers so they're not so precise. I think that works better than using the tip. I'm using my Giro 48, the darker red, up on the end so I can create those round flower shapes. I'm continuing to use the reds on the end to create those shapes. Deepening the color, going over the green sometimes to kind of dull it down. This time I'm just adding a general coat of red to make it a little bit deeper. I'm using the 371.5 when I do that. It just takes time to make all these little flowers. So take your time, don't rush through it. I'm continuing to add color to the background, darkening it and adjusting it as I see the need, adding in the greens, adding the yellow circles for the centers of the flowers, and adding more red. I'm going to speed this up a little bit for you. Now I'm adding a little pink to the mix. This is 286 Madder Pink. And it adds a nice little color. And putting it on the top of some of the flower shapes. I'm just following my reference photo. Everything's still very out of focus. It's going to form a nice background to the dog without calling attention to itself. We want it to complement what's going on in our painting. Join me for part 4, where we add the top coat and the final hairs to our dog.